The massive alien ships appeared above Earth like giant crystal palaces floating in space. Their surfaces sparkled and gleamed, catching the light from the sun as they hung motionless in the darkness. These weren't just any ships. They belonged to the Galactic Council, a group of alien races that had been collecting tribute from younger planets for thousands of years. Ambassador Velthar stood on the bridge of the lead ship, his body made entirely of living crystal that shifted colors as he moved. He had done the same job hundreds of times before on hundreds of different worlds. The process was always the same and always worked. Show up with overwhelming force, make demands, watch the primitive locals surrender everything they had, then move on to the next target. It was simple, efficient, and profitable. Down on Luna Base, humanity's main military command center built inside the moon, Admiral Kim Tae-ho watched the incoming transmission, with his jaw clenched tight. The message was crystal clear, and it made his blood boil. The aliens wanted 30% of all Earth's natural resources. They wanted all the gold, silver, rare metals, and clean water they could carry. But that wasn't the worst part. They also demanded 5 million human beings to be handed over as workers. 5 million people who would be taken from their families, their homes, their entire lives, to work as slaves for these crystal creatures on distant worlds they would never return from. The ultimatum gave Earth exactly 14 standard days to comply, or the alien fleet would simply take what they wanted by force and destroy anything that got in their way. Captain Park Ji-woo turned from his communication station, his face pale. "Sir, they're giving us 14 standard days to gather everything they want. After that, they say they'll start bombing our cities until we surrender." Admiral Kim looked over at Defense Minister Lee So-young, who had flown up from Earth that very morning when the alien ships first appeared. She was one of only 12 people on the entire planet who knew about humanity's biggest secret. For the past 3 years, while the rest of the galaxy thought humans were just another primitive species, barely capable of space travel, Earth's best scientists and engineers had been working on something extraordinary. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, completely invisible to alien sensors, floated humanity's real space fleet. These weren't the clunky research vessels and mining ships the aliens could see orbiting Earth. These were sleek, deadly warships powered by quantum technology that most alien races wouldn't develop for another 1,000 years. The ships were small compared to the alien giants, but they packed enough firepower to level entire moons. The secret project had started when humanity first detected alien communications 3 years ago. While everyone else on Earth was excited about first contact, the military leaders realized something terrifying. The alien chatter wasn't about friendship or trade. It was about conquest, slavery, and tribute collection. Earth was just another target on a very long list. So while diplomats prepared welcome speeches and scientists got ready to share human culture, Admiral Kim and his team began the most important military project in human history. They stripped resources from across the solar system, pulled the brightest minds from every nation on Earth, and built humanity's first real space navy in complete secrecy. Now, as the alien ambassador waited for Earth's terrified surrender, Admiral Kim allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had made 2 critical mistakes. First, they assumed humans would react like every other species they had conquered. Second, they had no idea what humans were truly capable of when someone threatened their families. "Send them a reply," Admiral Kim ordered, his voice calm and steady. "Tell them we need time to consider their generous offer. Say we're gathering the requested materials and we'll have an answer for them in 14 days. Defense Minister Lee raised an eyebrow. "Sir, are you sure about this approach?" Admiral Kim nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the alien ships on the main screen. "Oh, we'll give them an answer in 14 days. Just not the one they're expecting." As the message was transmitted to the alien fleet, Ambassador Velthar received it with satisfaction. Another primitive world was falling into line exactly as expected. He settled back to wait for Earth's inevitable surrender, completely unaware that humanity was already preparing the most shocking military response in galactic history. The countdown had begun, but it wasn't counting down to Earth's surrender. It was counting down to the day the galaxy would learn that some species simply refused to kneel. The 14 days passed like a slow countdown to Judgment Day. Ambassador Velthar sat comfortably in his crystal throne aboard the flagship, watching Earth's pathetic orbital traffic with mild interest. A few cargo ships, some research vessels, nothing that could possibly threaten his massive fleet. His crystalline body pulsed with satisfied colors as he prepared to receive the tribute ships that would surely arrive any moment now. The alien fleet had spread out in a perfect formation above Earth, their cathedral-like ships casting long shadows across the planet's surface. Each vessel was the size of a small city, covered in glowing symbols and decorative spires that had intimidated countless worlds before this one. The crews inside were relaxed, some even taking bets on how quickly the humans would grovel and beg for mercy once they saw the tribute ships approaching. But instead of the expected parade of human cargo vessels loaded with resources and terrified people, something completely different emerged from behind Earth's moon. At first, the alien sensors picked up what looked like small metallic objects, too small to be proper warships. Then more appeared and more, until an entire fleet of sleek angular vessels moved into formation between the alien armada and Earth. These human ships looked nothing like the ornate alien craft, where the council vessels were all curves and decorative, elements designed to inspire awe and fear. The human ships were sharp, practical, and built for one clear purpose. They looked like hunting knives compared to the aliens' golden chalices. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the alien fleet through the main screen. He could almost feel the confusion radiating from the enemy ships as they tried to figure out what they were looking at. He activated the communication system and broadcast on every frequency the aliens were using. "This is Admiral Kim Tae-ho of the United Earth Defense Force." His voice rang out clear and steady across space. "Humanity respectfully declines your tribute demand." The silence that followed lasted almost 30 seconds. Then Ambassador Velthar's image appeared on screens across both fleets, his crystalline features flickering through different colors as his emotions shifted from confusion to amusement to irritation. "Primitive species." Velthar's voice carried the tone of an adult scolding a misbehaving child. "You cannot comprehend the forces you oppose. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Our ships have reduced entire civilizations to ash. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate why resistance is futile and—" His words cut off abruptly as Captain Park Ji-woo's destroyer squadron moved into action. The human ships didn't attack the aliens directly. Instead, they targeted a large asteroid floating nearby, one that had been drifting harmlessly through space for millions of years. What happened next made every alien sensor operator lean forward in disbelief. The human plasma cannons didn't just blast the asteroid apart like conventional weapons would. Instead, they carved through the rock with surgical precision, cutting perfect geometric patterns that would have been impossible for any known technology. The asteroid transformed before their eyes from a rough chunk of stone into an intricate work of art. With each cut so precise, it looked like it had been made by the gods themselves. The alien computers immediately began analyzing the energy readings from the human weapons. The results made no sense. The power output was impossible for ships that small. According to everything the Galactic Council knew about physics and engineering, those human vessels should have been torn apart by the energy backlash from their own weapons. Commander Han Min-jun sat in the cockpit of his fighter, watching the massive alien dreadnoughts suddenly light up like Christmas trees as they activated every defensive system they had. Shield generators hummed to life, weapon systems swiveled to track the human ships, and emergency beacons started broadcasting across the alien fleet. "Admiral," Han spoke into his radio, barely able to keep the laughter out of his voice, "I think we got their attention." The standoff that followed stretched for hours that felt like years. Two completely different fleets faced each other in the cold emptiness between Earth and its moon. On one side, the massive, ornate vessels of the Galactic Council, their crews now frantically trying to understand what they were facing. On the other side, humanity's compact battle fleet, every ship positioned with mathematical precision. Down on Earth, billions of people watched the confrontation unfold on their screens. In homes, offices, schools, and military bases around the world, humans held their breath as they witnessed their species' first real military encounter with alien forces. Parents hugged their children tighter, soldiers checked their weapons one more time, and world leaders gathered in emergency sessions, all wondering the same thing. Would humanity's gamble pay off, or had they just signed their own death warrant? The alien fleet commanders found themselves in completely unfamiliar territory. Never before had a primitive species shown them advanced technology. Never before had anyone declined their tribute demands with such casual confidence. For the first time in their long careers of conquest, they faced an enemy they didn't understand, and that uncertainty was more terrifying than any weapon. The tension in space had been building for hours like a storm ready to break. Ambassador Velthar's crystalline body had shifted from calm blue to angry red as he watched the human fleet maintain their defensive position. His patience, built up over centuries of easy conquests, finally cracked like glass under pressure. Enough of this primitive defiance, Velthar snarled, his crystal form now pulsing with violent purple light. Show these insects what happens when they refuse the Council's generosity. Demonstrate our power. Destroy their orbital installations. The order rippled through the alien fleet like wildfire. Massive bioships, living vessels grown rather than built, began to glow with internal energy as they prepared their most devastating weapons. These weren't mechanical devices but actual living creatures, bred for war and capable of unleashing energy that could crack planets in half. The alien weapons charged with a sound like screaming wind, torrents of exotic energy, colored in shades that human eyes had never seen before, erupted from the Council ships toward Earth's orbital defense platforms. The energy beams twisted through space like living serpents, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a mountain. Every human watching from Earth held their breath. This was it. This was the moment that would decide whether humanity had a future or would become just another footnote in the Council's long history of conquest. But something impossible happened. As the alien energy struck Earth's defensive platforms, the human shields didn't collapse or explode. Instead, they absorbed the incoming fire like sponges soaking up water. The defensive barriers, which had appeared as faint blue shimmer around the orbital stations, suddenly blazed with brilliant white light that grew brighter with each alien attack. The Council weapons kept firing, pouring more and more energy into what should have been a simple destruction of primitive defenses. But the human shields just kept growing stronger, feeding off the alien energy and converting it into their own defensive power. What had started as faint protective barriers now shone like miniature suns around Earth's installations. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kim Tae-ho watched the alien barrage with calm satisfaction. His scientists had spent 2 years developing adaptive shield technology after studying captured alien energy signatures. The shields weren't just blocking the attacks. They were learning from them, adapting to each new type of energy and becoming stronger with every hit. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "shields are at 200% capacity and still climbing. The alien fire is actually making our defenses stronger." Admiral Kim nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the confused alien fleet. "Now," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's future. Captain Park Ji-woo, commanding the flagship Seoul's Pride, felt his heart race as he heard the simple command. This was the moment they had trained for, planned for, and built their entire fleet around. His finger hovered over the firing control for humanity's most advanced weapon system. "Quantum lance arrays. Full power," Park ordered. "Target the 3 lead Council ships. Let's show them what human engineering really looks like." The Seoul's Pride and her sister ships opened fire with weapons that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. The quantum lance arrays didn't fire energy beams or projectiles. Instead, they fired pure mathematics, focused, probability waves that could rewrite the laws of physics in a very small area, for a very short time. The precision strikes hit the Council's ornate shields and did something that should have been impossible. They didn't overpower the alien defenses or break through them with brute force. Instead, they simply convinced the universe that the shields didn't exist in the first place. The quantum lances passed through the supposedly impenetrable barriers, like they were made of air. What happened next took only seconds but changed galactic history forever. Three massive Council dreadnoughts, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering that had taken decades to grow, suddenly found themselves with gaping holes punched clean through their hulls. Critical systems failed in cascading failures as the quantum strikes disrupted the living ship's nervous systems. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon De-young watched from her command ship as the alien crews panicked. Through intercepted communications, she could hear the confusion and terror in their voices as they tried to understand what had just happened to their supposedly invincible vessels. "Looks like pretty ships don't fight so well when someone shoots back," she commented with grim satisfaction. Her marine assault teams were ready to board any disabled alien vessels, but it didn't look like that would be necessary. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish. When the weapons fire finally stopped and the energy dissipated, the tactical situation had completely reversed. The human fleet maintained their perfect defensive formation around Earth, their ships undamaged and their shields still glowing with absorbed alien energy. The Council fleet, meanwhile, was in complete chaos. Three of their most powerful ships were drifting helplessly with massive damage, their crews struggling just to keep life support running. The remaining alien vessels had pulled back beyond the moon's orbit, their commanders frantically broadcasting emergency signals back to their home worlds. Ambassador Velthar found himself in a situation no Council leader had faced in over 1,000 years. His fleet was retreating, his ships were damaged, and a primitive species had just demonstrated technology that made his own weapons look like toys. For the first time in his very long life, he was genuinely afraid. The humans had drawn first blood, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency signals from the Sol system reached the Council's homeworlds like wildfire spreading through dry grass. Within hours, the largest military response in galactic history was already moving toward Earth. Massive reinforcement fleets from 12 different alien species converged on humanity's solar system, their commanders confident that whatever primitive trick the humans had used would quickly be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But when the reinforcement armada arrived at the edge of the solar system, they found something that shook them to their core. The proud forward fleet that had set out to collect tribute from Earth was now scattered and broken, with damaged ships limping back toward the outer planets while frantically broadcasting distress calls. Admiral Kexthorn of the reinforcement fleet couldn't believe the reports coming from the surviving ships. According to the battle logs, primitive human vessels had not only resisted the Council's demands, but had actually defeated their most advanced warships in direct combat. It was impossible, but the evidence was floating right in front of him, in the form of crippled alien dreadnoughts. What followed was a campaign unlike anything in the Council's 1,000-year history of conquest. Instead of the usual pattern of overwhelming force leading to quick surrender, they found themselves fighting a war they didn't understand against an enemy that refused to play by the established rules. Human ships appeared everywhere at once, throughout the outer solar system. Small, fast vessels that seemed to materialize out of nowhere, strike with devastating precision, then vanish before the aliens could respond. The humans didn't fight like any species the Council had encountered before. They didn't mass their fleets for great decisive battles or try to hold territory. Instead, they hunted. Captain Choi Hyunwoo had become the ghost that haunted the Council's nightmares. His stealth corvette, the Busan Phantom, could slip through alien sensor networks like it didn't exist. The ship's advanced cloaking technology bent light and energy around it, making it invisible to every detection method the aliens possessed. "Target acquired," Choi whispered into his radio as he watched a massive Council supply convoy moving through the asteroid belt. The alien ships were enormous, each one carrying enough resources to supply a dozen worlds, but they were also slow and poorly defended. The Council had never needed to protect their supply lines before, because no primitive species had ever been able to threaten them this far from their home planets. Choi's quantum torpedoes streaked through space like invisible death. They phased through the supply ship's shields as if the defenses weren't even there, then materialized inside the alien hulls and detonated. Within minutes, the entire convoy was drifting helplessly, their engines destroyed and their cargo scattered across space. The psychological impact of these raids went far beyond the immediate military damage. For 1,000 years, the Council had maintained control through the simple belief that resistance was impossible. Now that foundation was cracking as word spread that humans were not only fighting back, but winning. Admiral Kim Tae-ho understood that this war would be won as much with ideas as with weapons. Working closely with Colonel Song Yi-jung's intelligence division, he launched a campaign that targeted the minds and hearts of every enslaved species in the galaxy. People of the galaxy, Admiral Kim's voice broadcast across countless worlds through hijacked Council communication networks. You are not alone. The Council's reign of terror is ending. Humanity stands with all free peoples against tyranny. Rise up. The time for liberation has come. The messages spread like wildfire through the galactic underground. Species that had been ground under the Council's heel for centuries began to whisper about the impossible news. Humans, a species so primitive that most aliens had never even heard of them, were actually defeating the supposedly invincible Council fleet. Rebellion sparked on dozens of worlds as enslaved populations realized that their oppressors weren't gods after all, just bullies who had never faced real resistance. Supply lines were sabotaged, communication networks went down, and Council garrison forces found themselves fighting desperate uprisings on planets they thought were completely pacified. The decisive moment came during what would later be known as the Battle of Jupiter's Rings. The Council had gathered their remaining forces around their ultimate weapon, the fortress ship Eternal Dominion. This wasn't just a warship, but a mobile battle station the size of a small moon, bristling with enough firepower to crack planets and protected by shields that had never been breached in over 500 years of service. Captain Park Ji-woo led the entire human battle group in a direct assault on this floating fortress. The alien commanders watched with confidence as the tiny human ships approached their impregnable stronghold. They had learned to respect human technology, but surely nothing could threaten the Eternal Dominion. The quantum torpedoes that struck the fortress ship were different from anything the humans had used before. These weren't just weapons, but reality-warping devices that convinced the universe to temporarily forget that matter, and energy followed normal rules. They phased through the massive alien shields like they were made of nothing more substantial than morning mist. When the torpedoes materialized inside the fortress ship's core and detonated, the explosion was visible from Earth. The Eternal Dominion, symbol of Council might for half a millennium, became an expanding cloud of superheated gas that lit up Jupiter's atmosphere like a second sun. The shockwave was so massive that it disrupted the gas giant's weather patterns, creating a storm that would rage for decades. Commander Han Min-jun, watching from his fighter cockpit as debris from the fortress ship rained down on Jupiter's moons, could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Admiral," he reported, his voice filled with awe, "the Council fleet is in full retreat. They're broadcasting surrender requests on all frequencies." The impossible had happened. Humanity, fighting their first interstellar war, had defeated the Kido, most powerful military force the galaxy had ever known. But more than that, they had shattered the myth of Council invincibility forever. Across the galaxy, enslaved worlds were rising up and the age of tribute and oppression was coming to an end. The hunt was over. Now came the real work of building a free galaxy. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council first appeared, above Earth demanding tribute, and the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Where once there had been a rigid hierarchy of master and slave species, now there was something unprecedented in galactic history, a growing alliance of free worlds working together as equals. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of humanity's newest flagship, the Incheon Rising, watching through the massive observation windows as the most important diplomatic gathering in galactic history took place. Ships from dozens of different worlds filled the space around the neutral station where the Terra Accords were being signed. Each vessel represented a species that had been enslaved by the Council for generations, and now they were free to chart their own destiny. The Incheon Rising itself was a symbol of how far humanity had come in just 6 months. Built using a combination of human engineering and salvaged alien technology, it was faster and more powerful than anything the Council had ever fielded, yet it served not as a weapon of conquest, but as a beacon of hope for oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy. Down in the station's main conference hall, the ceremony that would reshape galactic civilization was about to begin. Representatives from over 50 different species sat around a circular table designed to show that no one nation or race was more important than any other. The contrast with the old council chambers, where conquered species knelt before their crystal overlords, couldn't have been more dramatic. Ambassador Velthar entered the room slowly, his crystalline form noticeably dimmer than it had been during his first meeting with humanity. The proud alien who had once demanded tribute from Earth now moved like someone carrying the weight of his entire civilization's defeat. His crystal body, which had once pulsed with confident blue and purple light, now showed only the dull gray of resignation. The fallen ambassador approached the negotiation table with the careful steps of someone who knew they were walking into history. Around him, representatives from species that had been his slaves for centuries watched with a mixture of satisfaction and curiosity. Many had never seen their former master show anything resembling humility. "Your terms are acceptable," Velthar admitted, his voice carrying none of the arrogance it had held 6 months earlier. Each word seemed to cost him great effort, as if admitting defeat was physically painful for his crystalline physiology. "The hegemony will dissolve completely. Our member species will govern themselves as they see fit. The age of tribute collection is over." Defense Minister Li So-young, who had been promoted to serve as Earth's first galactic ambassador, stepped forward to sign the historic document. The Terra Accords represented more than just a peace treaty. They were a blueprint for a new kind of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. "We never wanted to rule anyone," Li said as she put her signature on the treaty that would echo through history. "We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives in peace. Now we want to make sure every species in the galaxy has that same chance." The signing ceremony was broadcast live to every corner of the galaxy, reaching worlds that had been cut off from outside communication for centuries. On planets where alien races had toiled as slaves, spontaneous celebrations erupted as people realized they were truly free. Children who had been born into servitude learned for the first time that they could dream of futures beyond forced labor. Captain Park Ji-woo, who had been promoted to admiral after his decisive victory at Jupiter, watched the ceremony from the observation deck of the Incheon Rising. Beside him stood Colonel Song Yi-jung, whose intelligence operations had been crucial in coordinating the liberation movements across the galaxy. Both officers had aged years in the past 6 months, but their faces showed the satisfaction of people who had helped change the course of history. Around them, the space near the diplomatic station filled with ships from liberated worlds. But these weren't the massive, intimidating dreadnoughts the Council had favored. Instead, they were vessels designed for exploration, trade, and peaceful cooperation. Some were sleek and efficient like human ships, others were organic and flowing, like living creatures, and still others were geometric crystalline structures that caught and reflected starlight in beautiful patterns. "What now?" Song asked, watching as human exploration vessels prepared to depart for the far reaches of the galaxy. The ships were loaded not with weapons and soldiers, but with teachers, doctors, engineers, and diplomats, ready to help newly liberated worlds build their own futures. Park pointed toward the galactic core, where the light of 1 billion stars illuminated countless worlds that still waited in the darkness of oppression. Even with the Council's defeat, there were other tyrants and bullies scattered throughout the galaxy, smaller versions of the same evil that had threatened Earth. "Now we keep the promise we made," Park said, his voice carrying the same quiet determination that had driven humanity through their impossible war. "No one kneels while humanity draws breath. We're going to make sure every species in the galaxy gets the chance to stand up and be free." The human exploration fleets began their journey into deep space, carrying with them not the banner of conquest but the promise of liberation. Behind them, Earth continued its transformation from a small, isolated world into the heart of a growing alliance of free peoples. The galaxy had learned that some species could not be conquered, only awakened to their true potential. And now, with humanity leading the way, that awakening was spreading to every corner of the stars. The age of tribute and slavery was ending, and the age of freedom had begun.